Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's good to be able to be here today to speak to this issue. I'm very happy with my colleague for bringing this forward. I think it's an important initiative, and it's unfortunate that we need it, actually, Madam Speaker. There are a number of other, you want to call it, ways to approach some of these issues. Basically, I would say various levels of dealing with it, and we've heard a little bit about some of them tonight, but I think I'll talk a little bit about that a little later. I guess one of the things that would give us a little bit more comfort is that we felt that this government was actually willing to deal with these issues seriously, and as far as we can see in the 2 years that they've been in, they are not. There's no indication that they would actually treat the issues that my colleague has brought forward, the issues of radicalization, of dealing with the connections to culture, to religion and education, and treating them seriously. In fact, we hear in their speeches tonight that they're just not willing to do that. And I think another example of their unwillingness to deal with this seriously is actually the way that they're going to be handling, the way they claim they're going to be handling is returning ISIS fighters. And in spite of the fact that the security or the safety minister, emergency and safety minister in the country has said that basically we're not going to be able to change these folks, and we're coming late to this fight anyway. Still, they come and they talk about they're going to have these programs. Prime Minister, I think yesterday or the day before in the House here, said that he believes that he can deprogram ISIS fighters when they come back. And as we pointed out, some of these folks are coming back deliberately. They're coming back here to stay and then to create trouble later. And I don't think that poetry sessions and sitting in counseling sessions is probably going to change that in their mind. So this government is not taking the issue of terrorism seriously. They're not really taking the issue of radicalization seriously. And we've seen that at one of the committees that I'm on as well. I'm very thankful that we were able to pass the Magnitsky Act a little bit earlier in this fall, because that was an important part of this whole piece, and certainly has been something that some of us worked on last Parliament, and we're able to, thanks to our member from Manitoba and one of our senators from the other place, we were able to bring that in here, and then the government finally came to their senses and supported it. But Canadians don't have confidence that this government's going to do the right thing. I think another example of that would be in their relationship with Iran. The member opposite asked a little bit earlier, you know, are there examples of places where you can see this kind of radicalization that could be taking place? And obviously over the years, Iran's been listed as a state sponsor of terror for a number of years by any number of countries. And certainly, again, the relationship that this government insists on having with them is just naive, that they think that somehow they're going to change their direction by kind of cuddling up to them, and that's not going to happen, Madam Speaker. So it's very disturbing. You see Iran trying to stretch itself out in the Middle East, the trouble that they're causing in places like Yemen, where they've gone in. They're trying to create as much of a conflict there as they possibly can as well. Another place, for those of us who have been working on the religious freedom issues over the years, another place where we see radicalization has taken place is through Wahhabism that's come out of Saudi Arabia. If that had been stopped, and the money that has been put into to spreading that ideology around the world had been stopped 20 or 30 years ago, Madam Speaker, we wouldn't find ourselves in the situation that we do right now. And so I respect the motion or the bill here that the member has brought forward. We do have several levels of dealing with these things. I mentioned state sponsors of terrorism. I think we've got two of them listed, I think, is still, which is Iran and Syria. Other countries list places like North Korea and Sudan and those countries as well. There's also another level of dealing with these issues, which is to list the terrorist entities. And when the government on the other side seems to say, well, this isn't really a serious issue or whatever, if you take a look at the number of listed entities that Canada has listed, it's well over 50. And these are 50 terrorist organizations that function around the world. Now, I think it's naive to think that not one of them is taking money and putting it into kind of parallel organizations, sister and brother organizations that may have very different names and aren't trying to influence governments around the world. And I think, as my colleague has pointed out, it's the flow of money here that's actually critical. And that's why at this level, and actually, we have sanctions on countries as well. There's a third level there of sanctions. We've got over 20 countries that are listed on a sanctions list, and that's tied to the United Nations Act, or actually Special Economic Measures Acts. And those countries have sanctions put against them for good reason. But this bill deals specifically with the flow of money and trying to stop that flow of money. And I think it's more than more than timely. It's past time that we should have brought this forward. And I would hope the government, doesn't sound like they're going to, but I would hope the government would step up and at least send this to committee and then see if there's some changes that they'd like to make and that we can agree to so that the bill can go forward and actually become effective in the future. Just want to talk a little bit about the bill. It starts off by talking about religious, cultural, and educational institutions, where they may play a central role in the lives of many Canadians. And, Madam Speaker, we know that's true, that those three components are critically important to a lot of people around the world. I think one of the other places that the government is naive is in the role that religious faith plays in many people's lives. They seem to think, some of the comments we've heard from some of their leadership indicates that they don't think that that's a relevant concept for people in this time and age. But that just shows a naivety about what's going on around the rest of the world, where the majority of people are informed and driven by some very serious faith considerations and beliefs in their own lives. And that's why I appreciate when a member has brought this forward in those terms. We also know that education plays an incredibly important role around the world, and typically if you're going to try to influence someone else and you're going to try to spend money doing that, you're likely to put it either into some sort of a faith institution or into an educational institution in order to try to change people's minds and thinkings. And so that's why this, I think, specifically addresses those issues and those components. And it goes on to say, whereas some foreign states and some entities and individuals abroad provide those institutions with funding through donations or gifts, we understand that there's money travels around the world. People who hold to different beliefs and principles are willing to spend their money and commit it to the causes. And for the most part, those are good causes. That's why Canadians contribute to charities. That's why we're known as some of the most generous people in the world, because people are willing to make those contributions to things that they think are important. That's the good side of the equation. But there are also people who don't have those same benevolent attitudes and who want to use their money in another way, which is to bring down other governments and other institutions and other states. And so this bill addresses that, and it says where funding can flow from foreign states, entities, or individuals that support or promote extremism, radicalization, or terrorism, and that seek to support those or to influence those institutions, that is where we believe that the Parliament of Canada needs to step in, Madam Speaker. And I think it's important that we do that. And so the members come forward with a bill. It's got a number of provisions to it. The purpose is to prevent an individual or entity or foreign state that does support or is associated with radicalization or terrorism from being able to fund those institutions around the world through either donations or gifts. It's a pretty simple explanation. There's a schedule that can be put in place that would deal with that, and then that would address the issue of those states, of those individuals, those foreign entities trying to have influence in Canada when they should not do that. And Madam Speaker, it's an incredibly important thing, I think, that we address this issue, because my NDP colleague has said that money is really not the issue here. I would disagree with him. The only way to actually diminish the activity is to cut off that funding and to reduce the money. Then you can take a look at some of the other causes, some of the other things that are influencing people to become radicalized. But as long as you allow foreign money to come into a country, whether it's Canada or another country, that gives a capacity to people to be able to influence, to tear down institutions, and then to do the damage that they really would like to see happen. And there's a number of provisions to this. I really think maybe it's worth going through, but it prohibits a foreign state whose name is set out in the schedule, or any senior official. That's good to cover that. Senior officials or members of the official's immediate family. We often see that where you've got a senior official that's functioning, and then family members are doing something off in another direction or whatever. I see, Madam Speaker, that my time is almost up. I think it's good that we've followed the lead of other countries. My colleague had mentioned countries such as Australia, who did this very specifically to deal with an issue that they had in their country, that Norway and Austria or other countries that have acted on this, and others such as the United States, United Kingdom are thinking about it. I think it's a good idea that Canada thinks about it as well, and I think it would be a great help to many people around the world and to many Canadians if the government would treat this seriously, support the bill, take it through to committee, and then we can have further discussion about it.